Symbols are an integral part of Azadari, and I'll mention why. But Azadari is this. Okay. Now let me ask you, I want to do this. I want to express this Azadari. How am I going to do it? I want to express grief. To express grief, you need language, right? Right? So I'll have to express my grief either in English, or in Urdu, or in Persian, or in Gujarati, or some other language, maybe French. Okay. So naturally what happens is that all these things, all these four things, so keep this in mind, Azadari is these four actions, four things. When you want to do these things and express these, naturally you have to do it in some cultural form, right? If you want to have a Nauha, it's going to be tied to some culture, right? Some language, some culture, some artistic expression, some type of poetry, because it's not created in vacuum. In other words, the actions that we do in Azadari are Islamic, but how we actually perform them and express them is cultural. It takes a cultural form. And therefore, you have different cultures historically expressing the same thing, like the Azaa of Imam Hussain, in very different ways. And that, sometimes you see, it creates an amazing diversity. It creates an amazing ways of artistic expression. In Persian culture, it's done in a different way. In Arab, it's different way. In Indo-Pak, it's done in different way. And then you see other newer cultures joining. So for example, with the migration of Shia populations to the West, you have slowly like a bit of English Azadari culture is slowly starting to come up. With, for example, coming of Tashayyu and Shiaism into Africa, for especially the Swahili belt, you have Swahili expressions of Azadari showing itself, right? So it's something very interesting that expressions of Azadari are always cultural. I want to take 1 or 2 minutes. So I'm going to continue my discussion. So I'm just taking a detour. And I just want to 1 or 2 minutes speak about these symbols that we have in Azadari. And again, the aim of this session is to get a bit of clarity and get a bit of meaning to different things that we do. And I'm saying this, that if someone is doing these things without realizing this meaning, please do add that meaning. There's no harm. Because at times we might be doing some of these things, but I'm shedding tears, but I don't know why. Okay? If I don't know, I should find out, so it adds more meaning and more quality to my Azadari. So what I want to say is that this form of organized Azadari, because see, someone can come and say that, look, I can do Azadari at home, individually in my private space. I don't need anyone. I can express grief. I can recite Nauha, Marsiya, Matam, shed tears. But what we want to do, and historically what the Shia community guided by the ulama did, was that they took Azadari to an organized form with a lot of symbols. And you may wonder why. Why did it go down that track? There are reasons. These symbols are very important. So for example, this is a symbol, right, we use for Hazrat Abbas. We use the hand. Okay. It's a symbol. Okay. And you can see it's there across different cultures. Persian culture, Indo-Pakistani culture, Arab culture. But you might say that, okay, maybe in a certain culture, this specific symbol to remember Hazrat Abbas is not there. It's possible, because it's a cultural expression. But in some cultures, it's very prominently there. You can see it. And these symbols have a lot of significance because they remind us of certain values and goals and our purpose. And that's why even the Holy Quran, so I'm connecting it to the Quran because someone can ask, where is Azadari in the Quran? Okay. So the first answer to that is that, look, Imam Hussain and Azadari came after the Quran, right? So of course, there's not going to be a direct mention of that thing very specifically. There's going to be general principle and guidelines in the Quran that we can relate to the practice of Azadari, and this is the verse that the scholars use. وَذَلِكَ وَمَن يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. And those who respect Allah's symbols. Okay, so sha'a'ir Allah, it's a loose translation where you have these symbols that remind you of Allah. Imam Hussain is a symbol that reminds us of Allah. Karbala is a symbol that reminds us of Allah. Hazrat Abbas is a symbol, it's a big symbol that reminds us of obedience to Allah, our path, our duty. So now, they become symbols, and the Quran tells us that you have to respect these symbols, you have to uphold them, you have to make them big. You have to make a big deal out of these symbols, that everywhere they should be seen. Right? making a big deal out of this thing. And this is exactly what even Quran did. Let me ask you, why do we celebrate Eid al-Adha every year? Why? What's special on that day? Just 10th Zilhaj, right? Why not any other day? Why? Because that day is a symbol of the sacrifice of Prophet Ibrahim. So that action was liked by Allah so much that Allah made a big deal out of it, made a symbol and told us every year you have to remember. Why? Because I want to make a big deal out of it. Why? Because it's a powerful thing for everyone to remember something. Now, these symbols have a lot of significance. So what are the reasons that these symbols of Azadari are important? So I'm going to quickly mention 4 things. Of course, we're going to have Q&A section, so if there's any clarification you need, because some of these things I might just quickly mention and move on because of time. So I want to also make sure that we have enough time for Q&A. The first reason is that because Azadari for Imam Hussein is supposed to be a social movement needs symbols. Okay? Like you go on streets, let's say you're protesting, right? Let's say for some other reason. Now you want to show it to others, what are you protesting regards to? What is your message? Why are you out? You'll have symbols. You have those placards, you'll have something, you'll have flags, you'll have some way to convey. So whenever you have a social movement, you need symbols to show it to others. Okay? So same way, Azadari is a social movement, so we need to create symbols through which we can give out these messages, so that we can so we wear black, it's a symbol. Okay? So others feel that, oh, it's a social movement, they are grieving for something. Okay? So that's one reason, that's not the entire reason. The second reason is symbols are ways to project values. Okay? I know. Let me explain. Okay. So see, we have values. So for example, we have a value called bravery. Okay, show me bravery. Show me in like, how does it look? Is it red? Is it white? Is it big? Is it small? Bravery is a value. It doesn't have a form and shape. We understand what it is. But it's, as they call, abstract. It doesn't have form, shape, anything. So what happens is that when you speak of bravery, people find it hard to connect to it. They want bravery symbolized into action, into personalities. So you have Hazrat Abbas, for example. Okay. So when you have a personality like this, in that setting of Karbala, with that great sacrifice, with so much bravery in face of oppression and denial of food, water, everything, you make him a symbol. And you say that, look, you want to understand what bravery is? Look at him. He's the symbol. So symbols are used to project values. Okay? So many of these things we should give that meaning. Alam, for example, right, is there to project values that, okay, what would alam signify in those days that yes, we are still there and the alam is still standing. The alam of truth, the flag of truth is still standing, and today we are going to uphold it. See, there's symbolism in it. And of course, we need to add these meanings to these symbols, because this danger is always there, that if you have a symbol, but you disconnect it from its message, then maybe even we won't understand what the symbol is for. Okay? The symbol might be good, but you're not benefiting fully from that symbol. That's the second reason these symbols are there. The third reason is that symbols are ways through which people emotionally connect with Imam Hussein and Azadari. See, this is a reality of human life, right? We want something tangible. We are children of nature, material world, right? If I want to connect to something emotionally, it's like I feel that, oh, show me something. Like, and at times people go down the wrong direction sometimes, right? Like they want to connect to the Imam. So it's like, let me make a portrait and a picture of the Imam, right? Why do you think people do that? The reason is because they want something tangible. They want Imam Ali to be there to like connect to him and love him and show that thing to him. Of course, that's a wrong expression, because according to the Fatwa of Maraji, you cannot make these kind of things. But if it's not something like that, if you have symbols that allow you to connect emotionally to Imam Hussein, then these symbols serve a very important function of getting us closer emotionally to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So these are the benefits of having these symbols, and I really want to emphasize, because in our Azadari, in addition to those things which I mentioned, gathering, majalis, having a lecturer come and give us knowledge, musiba, matam, nauha, ziyarats that we recite, in addition to that, we also have symbols. And they play a certain role. And the last point I want to mention about symbols is that symbols are artistic expressions, right? And artistic expressions are heavily tied to culture. Right? Different cultures have different forms of art. Okay? And these expressions of Azadari are artistic. These symbols that we, for example, these banners that you have, it's art, right? The calligraphy that's gone on to it, everything. It's an art. So for example, you can say that this is Persian Arabic art. Like the art we have, a lot of these things. It has a rich history of calligraphy and all that. And now you see this art showing itself as a symbol of Azadari. When you look at it, it reminds us. It has a message, it has a name. So these symbols are artistic expressions. Okay. My next slide is, this is very interesting. As I mentioned initially, that at times you want to check that, for example, in Azadari, are we doing the right thing? Okay. One of the ways to reference that is see what our ulama and scholars are saying regarding Azadari. It's very important. Why? Because they have studied Islam well. They've looked at all the ahadith. They understand where to place what. And they give us the result. Maybe you might read one hadith and it might shape your perception in a way that might not be fully accurate because they've not looked at other ahadith. But a scholar has seen everything. So this I wanted to show, it's very interesting. So this is, during COVID times, this was like a statement issued by Ayatollah Sistani. May Allah protect him and protect all the ulama, inshallah. Please recite the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay. So, of course, it's a long statement, and the initial parts are regarding COVID and how do you do and that. But look at the third point. So I've cut, so the between part I've cut, and you can see. Let me read it for you. It's so interesting. And it's related to symbols of Azadari. So let's see what he says. This is a written statement from Ayatollah Sistani himself. He says, broadly spreading, that is broadcasting the symbols of Ashura by raising flags and banners in the city squares, streets, alleys, and other public places, provided that this does not entail an infringement on private property. We can't do that, right? I can't put a banner without somebody's permission. You have to take care of Sharia. Or violation of state laws. Banners should include passages from the words of Imam al-Hussein to remind others of his profound reformative movement, as well as the masterpieces of poetry and prose that were composed about this great tragedy. And then he gives some other guidelines regarding food and how we should distribute it. This shows that these symbols are important. Our ulama and scholars are telling us, look, preserve these symbols, but he's also giving us guidelines how these symbols should look. So I'm going to speak about this. Okay. My next slide is I think there's a video that I was going to show, but I think just to save time, I'll share a video. It's can be shared in the public group. It's like a 5-minute video that shows how these expressions of Azadari are different across different cultures. Okay, it's a very nice video made by someone. So inshallah, I'll then share that later. So this was the second part of my discussion, where the conclusion so far is this. So if I summarize everything I said so far, I've said two things. One is that Azadari is an Islamic practice that we learn from Ahlul Bayt. Okay? And it includes 4 things: gatherings, expression of grief, shedding tears, and symbols. How these 4 things happen and how we show these things is cultural. It's tied to our culture, and you can have diversity in that. There is no fixed way that you have to do it exactly this way. It's tied to our culture. But now that raises the question, and that's the third question, and inshallah I'll finish after that and we have Q&A. So does that mean that any cultural expression of Azadari is fine? Because we said that, right? Expression of Azadari is cultural. It will be in some. So is it okay to initiate any cultural expression in the name of Azadari and say that, look, because it's for Imam Hussein, no one questioned this? The answer, of course, is no. There is going to be some guidelines, some framework. It's not like let me give you not a very good example, right? What would you say about someone who steals money and uses that money for niyaz of Imam Hussain. Is that a good thing? Can you say is upholding Azadari, is doing the right thing? No, right? Like, yes, we know giving niyaz and food for Imam Hussain is very good, but you can't do it using an haram action, right? It doesn't work. In fact, it doesn't serve the purpose of Imam Hussain at all, right? It goes against the very purpose for which he stood, his mission. If someone is going to steal money, I'm just giving an example that's so clearly wrong. Okay? So how do we look at these cultural practices of Azadari which are going to be there? So just to summarize everything very quickly, I'm going to divide it into 5 steps. Okay, just to make it systematic, that how do we approach these cultural practices of Azadari? Step number 1, I'm going to call it red lines. Step number 2 is respect. Step number 3 is value oriented. I know these don't make any sense right now. I'm going to explain. These are just the words. 4th step is Shia identity. 5th step is preserve plus improve. Okay. So whenever we look at these cultural expressions of Azadari, we have to run it through these 5 steps to see where do they stand and how do we deal with them and what should be our approach to these things. First step is that red lines. What does red lines mean? So I've written it here, so I'm just going to read it for you. So all cultural expressions of Azadari should be within the limits of Sharia. It has to be like this. I can't say, oh, it's my culture, so I'm going to do something haram for Azadari. It doesn't work. Yes, it's your culture, you do it differently from another person. You recite Nauha in Urdu, that person will recite maybe in, I don't know, some other language, that's fine. We have to make sure it's not haram. There's nothing haram involved in Azadari, and Azadari doesn't lead us to leave out our wajibat, right? And sometimes you have these rare examples, like for example, let's say somewhere, the youth, they go for matam, and sometimes they have shabedari and matamdari, and many of them, they don't wake up for Fajr Salah. That's not something we can do. That's not permissible. That because of course, the Azadari is different from missing the Salat, but if Azadari is going to lead us to not pray, then that's not acceptable, even though it's an expression of Azadari. So that's the first step. Step 2, and this is really important, because I just explained that, look, how people express their emotions for Imam Hussain is very different. It's very diverse. It's very culturally tied. It's even very personal at times, right? It might become very personal that I grew up in a certain way that, for example, I connect to this personality in Karbala more. It's a very personal thing. So as long as the cultural expressions of Azadari are halal, we should respect when others are doing it. This is really important. Of course, this doesn't mean there's no room for improvement and betterment. I'll speak about that. But at the first stage, at the second stage actually, so stage number 2, when I see that, okay, this person, for whatever reason, in a halal way, he connects to Imam Hussain through this symbol, through this nauha, through this speaker, through this style of reciting masa'ib, let them connect. Let them connect through that means. Why? Because at times that might be their only chance to connect to Imam Hussain. Don't seize that from them, right? At times a person might have a single avenue to connect to Imam Hussain. And if I'm going to even say that, oh, why are you doing this? This is, no, if it's halal, then we respect the expressions of Azadari that other people are doing, other cultures. So this is really important. Okay. Step number 3. Yes, we respect this variety of expressions of Azadari, but does that mean that all expressions of Azadari have same value? The answer is no. Of course, all of them are respected because they're attributed to Imam Hussain, but at times you can have expressions of Azadari that are better than others, not that other ones are bad. Okay, sometimes we think that something is better, the other thing is bad. No, it's about good and better. So at times, you can have a scale and you can weigh that, okay, this expression of Azadari is better than others. So it's one simple example. So let's say you make a t-shirt. So t-shirt is a symbol for Imam Hussain. Imagine you make a t-shirt with just the flag and Ya Hussain written on it. Is that bad? No, it's good. It's a t-shirt, you wear it, it's a symbol. It reminds you of Imam Hussain, it connects you to Imam Hussain, it connects others to Imam Hussain, reminds them. But what if someone adds a message to the t-shirt? Like you see in this thing, right? Like, so I just picked up online, so I don't know if there's any copyrights, but it says, for example, remember me when the truth becomes alone, alone and sad. This is a message, right? So if our symbols, our expressions of Azadari are more in line with the goals and the values and the general direction of Azadari for which Azadari was made, then it has more value. So some symbols are stronger than others. Again, I'm not here to judge each single one. For example, you might have a know-how which is very good in expressing emotions, expressing musibah, and expressing the values of Imam Hussein. That bravery, that loyalty, that connection to Allah. These are the values of Ashura, right? Like we are there to be reminded of these values. Ashura is very, very value-packed. Like every single event, every personality is packed with a lot of Islamic values. So symbols that reflect these values more are better. Okay? You can grade them. So it's not that in terms of value they're equal. They might have different levels of importance. Let me also say this as a side thing in brackets as well, that sometimes if we are not careful, some symbols can also acquire a side negative impact if we don't do it well. Just to give an example, let's say someone recites a Nauha with a fabricated historical fact. No, that's going to not be something which is in line with what we want to do for Azadari. We want to move forward and have this thing. So we can judge, yes. Fourth step, inshallah in 2 minutes I'll finish and then we have Q&A, is that some expressions of Azadari have become so common and so universal for the Shias, universal not for everyone, for the Shias around the world, that in a way they count as like reflecting our Shia identity. For example, matam that we do, the expression. Because see, expression of grief can come in different ways, right? You can recite a Nauha in Punjabi, very specific one. It's a very specific expression to the Punjabi people. Maybe I as an Indian or Persian won't connect at all. That's fine, that's a local expression. But now you see, for historical reasons, we have certain expressions of Azadari that have become universal. Okay? So those we shouldn't leave them. Those we shouldn't leave them. Those we shouldn't allow them to weaken. Even if we say that, oh, our next generation is not so used to it, we should make arrangements so that they can connect to these universal ways of doing Azadari that is like strengthens our Shia identity. Such that when they go to, for example, Arba'in, which is the mass grand gathering of all the Shias, that's what it is, right? They don't feel left out. They don't feel odd. Okay? Let's say there is a community who says that, okay, we are not going to have matam at all. Okay? When they'll go there, they'll feel like, oh, we are not able to connect in the way that other people are going to connect. So the fourth step is, as I've written here, that there are expressions of Azadari that have a rich history and they're kind of universal. We try and preserve them. We try and make sure that we connect to them. The last point, and inshallah I should stop there, is that, but when it comes to local expressions of Azadari, not those big ones, like those major ones, right? Those which are tied to like our culture, our way of doing, then we should always, okay, it's gone. So, I think this is an indication that I should stop. I don't know what happened, but the last sentence was that when it comes to these other expressions, like Nauhas and other things, under guidance of scholars and in a careful way, we should always try to improve them. It's not that we have been told that all the expressions of Azadari symbols have to always stay static. Maybe this year we did it in a way, next year we improve it. But of course, it needs to be done carefully. Why? Because if we do it in a very rash manner or in a sudden manner, it might have a backlash. Right? Maybe people won't understand why this is being done. So you need scholarly guidance, needs to be done carefully. But that shouldn't stop us from, inshallah, improving the quality of our Azadari every single year, inshallah. Thank you very much for your time. So this was my entire presentation. Of course, the slides are not there. I had summarized it also in one last slide, but I think the summary is very simple and clear. Azadari is an Islamic practice taken from the Ahlul Bayt. Second, oh, nice, thank you. Yeah, this is the summary. So let me summarize this in 2 lines, so at least we know that these 40 minutes of presentation that I gave, so this is what we, inshallah, try to understand. First thing, Azadari is an Islamic practice. Why? Because it was practiced and taught by the Ahlul Bayt, and it continued through the generations, and you see, it's a constant conduct of all our ulama. All the scholars would do it. Okay? So that's an indication. That's point number 1. Point number 2, which didn't come up in my presentation, but I want to mention, and we should be careful, is that Azadari is not replacement for other parts of deen. So we have to be careful. Azadari is not there so that I do Azadari so I can skip other things. I do Azadari so I don't pray. I do Azadari so I don't fast. I do Azadari so I don't be good to my family. I do Azadari so I do my business in any way. No, in fact, Azadari is supposed to complement those, not replace those. So Azadari is not, it's very powerful. It's very useful, packed with benefits, but that doesn't mean that it replaces other parts of deen, so we need to be careful. Expressions of Azadari are definitely cultural, and they are heavily tied to these things: language, geography, civilization, art, and other cultural factors. Okay? So Eastern civilizations would express and do Azadari in a different way. As compared to, let's say, the same thing would go and become an integral part of, let's say, a section of Western civilization. They would do it in a different way. Geography has an impact, art has an impact, poetry has an impact. Persian poetry is different than Arabic poetry. So the Persian poetry is going to express Azadari of Imam Hussain in a very different way. Okay? So expressions are cultural and diverse. There is scope for improvement. We are not saying that we have to be static. No, if we can improve the quality of Azadari and make them more in line with our values and goals of Imam Hussain and the reason for which he sacrificed himself, we are getting closer. And the last part I want to mention also is that new culture. So let us say, for example, Indian Pakistani culture, the tradition of Azadari is very old, few hundred years. Persian culture, Arabic culture. But let us say, for example, Swahili culture, right? Where we know that Shiaism is not very old. Okay? So now a new culture, when they are expressing Azadari, they can adopt, they can make a kind of their own cultural expression of Azadari. Of course, they take inspiration from others. It's not that they have to reinvent the wheel, do everything from scratch. They can look, oh, Indians do like this, others do like this, is like this. And you can come up with your own very beautiful, very meaningful, amazing expression of Azadari in that language, suitable for that culture. And what's interesting is that this is the power of Azadari, that it's so universal, any culture can express the themes in Karbala in their own language. This is the beauty and power of the sacrifice of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So inshallah, thank you very much for your time and for patiently listening. And this was my presentation. I'll stop here, and we have a bit of time, inshallah, for question and answers. That's how it was planned. And then inshallah, I'll end, because it's Thursday night also, I'll just end with like a few words of Musibah as well, like Masaib in the end. So inshallah, we practice what we learned, that one of the expressions of Azadari is expressing that grief and the Musibah of Ahlul Bayt. So let's end this part with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Yes, there's any questions? If there's no questions, then, but please do ask questions. We wanted to have this session, so, and alhamdulillah, we also have other ulama scholars. Sheikh Rahil is here, Sheikh Habib is here. Is there any other? Sheikh Ali Samoja is here. So inshallah, they'll also contribute, and we'll try and benefit from them as well. Yes. Yes? Whoever wants to. So I'll try and take one from each side so we can see if there's enough questions, then we try and balance, inshallah. Yes, you want to start? Bismillah.
Hassan, thank you, Sheikh. My question is, in like the first hadith that you presented, maybe there's more and I obviously don't know them, but it said that like 10 days in the first few hadiths, it was like leaning towards like the first 10 days. So what about after that? Because we kind of have this culture in the communities of Muharram and Safar as the months of mourning. So what about that?
Yeah. So as I mentioned even in my lecture, that we do not come to conclusion by looking at one hadith. and one seerah and conduct from the imam. So that's one example, which of course clearly shows that those 10 days are special. So look at other ahadith, other conduct. So for example, it's not even just limited to Muharram and Safar. We have ahadith which say that, okay, Thursday night is specific to ziyarat of Imam Hussain. Okay, that kind of shows that, okay, even on Thursday night, that remembrance kind of thing has to, like, we remember him. Or for example, we have ziyarat of Arba'in. So for example that. Or we have the shahadat of Imam Zainul Abidin. Again, that's also related to the same period, same Karbala. So what has happened is that based on these different things, putting together the ayam, the specific days and nights where it's kind of automatically you'll remember Karbala because the personalities are from Karbala, it has come down to this, that Muharram and Safar, these 2 months become, like if you say historically also, these 2 months become places where we kind of stay in this kind of a mood where we are remembering them. Okay, so it's kind of a cumulative thing that the scholars have picked up looking at so many different things. And you can say that this would be the conduct and the seerah of the ulama, that they would maintain these 2 months. But of course, we definitely know that those first 10 nights are more special. So the level of grief and that should be more in those nights. And beyond Muharram and Safar also, some amount of remembrance of Imam Hussain, like we have a Thursday majlis, it's something suitable. It's something desirable. Of course, this is not a question of wajib and haram. It's not saying that if someone doesn't remember, they've committed an haram act, right? Like Thursday. But it's something that we historically do, and we also have ahadith that speak that, okay, Thursday night has a connection to Imam Hussain, and the scholars continue that, and they have this kind of a thing where, okay, this is a good thing to do. Like, it's a way for us to connect to Ahlul Bayt. Question? Alaikum assalam.
I wanted to know what meals to be served after Azadari, as you mentioned, but you didn't mention them.
Okay. So of course, I cannot very specifically say. There are general guidelines about it. So a meal that is suitable to that environment of Azah, it shouldn't be something definitely like that's considered there as something, let's say, lavish or celebratory. So these two things, it shouldn't be lavish, and it shouldn't be something that's considered celebratory, like you're celebrating something that can. And again, as I said, that this can be different from one culture to another. One same thing in one culture might be completely okay to give, because it doesn't have that connotation that, oh, you're celebrating or you're in the mood of joy and enjoyment. So the key point is that we have to maintain the sanctity of Azadari and that respect. Anything that fits that, which automatically means it shouldn't be tied to celebrations and that kind of, and of course not lavish. Because naturally when something is lavish, it goes against the idea of Azah and being in the state of grief. So it has to be in line. Okay. So usually when it comes to these cultural practices, we have guidelines. Okay. Of course those haram, I mean, I can't serve haram food. That's known. So I think we're not speaking about that. So we definitely know it's halal. In the halal things, what's better, we have these guidelines. And these guidelines might mean that in different cultures, it might show it slightly differently. Okay? So, and at times, there might be examples of foods being served that it's not very clear if it's on the right side or on the wrong side. We're a bit confused, like, right? It's not so clear. Oh, in this culture, serving this dish is considered against the sanctity of Azah. Maybe we are in doubt. So if I'm in doubt, I can't judge other person if he's doing it, because even myself, I don't know. I can't say that why you're doing this. Maybe personally, I want to do ihtiyat and avoid. So at times it might come down in some examples. Yes, there are some examples which are clearly lavish and celebratory. We avoid those. There are clearly those examples which are not like that, which are very modest, very simple food. So that we know we should definitely do. There might be some examples which might be in between, which it's hard to decide. So when in those cases, please don't judge others that, oh, why you are having that. Yes, personally, if you want to avoid, do it, or go and seek clarity. Go speak to a scholar, have like a discussion that is this, where does it fit? And in some place, it's like this. In some places in our lives, we face doubt. Things, when we don't have ilmul ghaib, we don't know everything. So sometimes we don't know something, we take it, I do ihtiyat if I want. The other people, if they are doing, it's okay. I won't judge them for doing that. Any other question? Maybe I can even ask the shuyukh to answer. So can also benefit from them. Any other questions? Okay, so usually they say that, yes, Bismillah, Bismillah. Any questions? I'll try and answer. We have other shuyukh, inshallah, will
Let's say
benefit.
down the road, 40 years, 50 years, we have a committee which undermines Azadari. What should the masses do? What should the members do? How should they react on such decisions by the committee?
Okay, so we're speaking of a hypothetical situation. So there's two things. First thing is that we have to very, very be careful in ascertaining this, that yes, they are undermining Azadari, because at times it might be very easy to say that, oh, he's undermining Azadari, but we need to be careful, because basically, if you want to be absolutely sure that someone is undermining Azadari, we need a lot of evidence, we need scholars to give their input that, oh, okay, really, for example, this person, I think, is undermining Azadari. So first it needs to be established that it is actually being undermined. So that is, of course, there. Let us say that is happening, then, of course, everybody has responsibility, right? Because it's an important practice, it's something that has a lot of benefits, we don't want it to die down, we want to pass it on to our next generation. Then the community as a whole has responsibility, but doesn't mean that everybody goes and thing. Community now has to find mechanism to deal with it. And there can be different mechanisms. For example, you speak to the scholar in the community, because he's supposed to be making sure that the community is in the right direction. That's the duty of the scholar, right? He has to be watchful that, okay, are we going in the right direction? If he himself, the local scholar, is not able to do, he'll refer to his senior scholar, and we have hierarchy of scholars. So first step I would say is that, okay, go and speak to the scholar, speak about this. If it's really clear it's undermining, then he would go as a first step and he would do that. Of course, in addition to that, we as masses continue doing Azadari. Like if someone is undermining, at least I can, in my own capacity, in my own house, in my own surroundings, I uphold Azadari in whatever way I can. Unless that person is again, it's all hypothetical, so I don't know. Unless that person is so powerful that he won't even let you do in your house. But I don't think so it can come down to that. So basically our duty is that we ask people in charge of the community, the scholars and those, that they should get involved. And we continue our duty of upholding Azadari and doing these actions that have been told by the Ahlul Bayt. Any question from this side? Yes, Bismillah.
Thank you very much. What is your view about, as you said, any form of azadari within the Sharia? So what is your view about Zanjir Matam?
As I mentioned, that there's two aspects to any of these practices. So one is that first you have to see, is it halal or haram? And for that thing, in any other matter, not only azadari, we refer to a marja. That's the thing. And if a marja gives fatwa that, okay, this form of azadari, whatever it may be, zanjir, a special way of doing zanjir or not, if they say it's haram, we leave it. Okay? So the first step is that we have to absolutely make sure that our azadari, all the practices are within the limits of Sharia. So that's first step. Second step I would say is again the same thing. This practice, for example, zanjir, or any other practice, I'm going to weigh it on this scale of how much it is in line and how much it is promoting the values and the goals of Karbala. Okay. What is the impact of this practice? Okay. Because see, we are very goal-oriented. We don't do actions just for the sake of it, right? Even something like salat, that's so specifically defined, we are told you pray because you want to achieve a lot of things. Aqimis salat li dhikri, as-salat tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar, mi'rajul mu'min. We want to pray, so we want to get some benefit. So azadari is the same. We want to perform this azadari because we want to achieve a lot of these benefits. So I'll weigh it on that scale. This practice, how much it is taking me closer to Abu Abdullah, the values, the mission of azadari. If it's taking me closer, I would say, okay, this is good. But if it's something that is kind of not very much in line with the values and goals of Azadari, we should find a way to remedy it, improve it, improvise in our Azadari. And historically, if you see, that's been the case. That the ulama, scholars, those in charge, they would always make sure that the quality of our Azadari should always increase. We express in better ways, more Islamic ways, more in line with our values. So that would be the two approach. If it's haram, it's haram. If not, then we improve it if it is not in line with our values, the values of Aza and Karbala. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
What happens in a situation of gatherings where, for example, a child doesn't understand the language? Alhamdulillah, this time we had 2 different languages where definitely they had one that they could understand. But what happens in the situation of, for example, they tell you, no, it's an Urdu majlis and I don't understand.
Okay.
How do you explain to them, or how do you still insist to take them, even though maybe later you will not have the time to describe what the Maulana said, or you would not have a summary to give them? How do you explain to them that, no, you still have to attend? Or
Yeah. So if we go back to the same thing I mentioned, that Azadari is a package, right? It involves like 4 or 5 things. Okay. One part of that is getting more knowledge and information, and it's a very important part. I'm not saying that it's not important, and I'm not trying to compare these against each other. Each part is very important in its own place. But Azadari, in addition to having a lecture, knowing about Imam Hussein and Islam, it's a platform to gain knowledge, it has other elements. And those other elements are very heavily to do with our emotions, right? That love of Imam Hussein, shedding tears, expression of grief, that environment, doing it together. So that element of gathering is important. That's why I put it first. Majalis and gathering. So you need a gathering where it has that environment and everybody is in that kind of like huzn and that. You need expressions of grief which are emotional. Okay. You need a lecture also, and you need to uphold symbols. Okay. So now when it comes to our children and next generation, we have to make arrangements for all 4. Right? Okay. We have to make arrangements for all 4. So let us say lecture is something that they are not understanding. And again, I'm not here to give very specific solutions that, go and do this tomorrow. I'm giving you options. Which option suits this community needs to be thought of. For example, let's say the lecture is in Urdu and the young generation is not understanding. You have 2 options for this section. One option is that you promote Urdu, do something so they understand. That's one option. I'm just saying that we should think of these options. I'm not saying it's practical, we should do it. I'm not here to give like actual practical direction. I'm here to explain. Okay. The other option is that, okay, the lecture part, you do it in English, which for example was tried this time, right? Okay. And at times, even the solutions are not something that are ready that, this is the best solution, let's know. Sometimes you'll have to do a bit of trial and error. It's not like, okay, English will definitely work. You try, but that needs a bit of like a guided effort. Okay, this year you do English lecture, the only lecture part. Take feedback, see what the impact was, what were the shortcomings. You need to look through it how it worked. If you see that English didn't work at all, yes, for example, I'm not saying it definitely did work. Sheikh Rahil was giving amazing lectures. I was following online. But let us say that you come to this that it didn't work. Why? Because no one was coming. Let us say, then you need to rethink. But that's for the lecture part. And we shouldn't forget that Azadari is not only that. There's 3 other things. One is the environment. So if you're going to have a full English program where they miss the larger environment, it's something to think about. Can you replicate that vibrant environment in their setting? It's a question. For me personally, what is more kind of a thing that when I think about it, that thing is that how are they emotionally going to connect? That part is very important. Expression of grief, able to shed tears, connect to some of these masa'ib, feel for it and like burn from inside and that kind of a thing. So that again needs to be thought of. And that a lot depends on which cultural expressions are strong and powerful. Okay, so at times you see, and there's historical reasons. For example, our connection has been strong with the Urdu tradition of Azadari, and it's very powerful. The Nohas are very refined, the expression of emotions. It's an Eastern language, so anyways, poetry is much more powerful, expressive. You can say things, the metaphors that they use are very, very like, it just hits you. You just say one thing and it just hits you. So we'll have to judge. If we see that, look, for example, for that emotional connection part, currently our best option is Urdu, for example, we focus on strengthening. Let's get them into the thing. And at times it's possible. Why? Because we live in a globalized kind of a setting where if a Noha becomes popular in Urdu, everybody knows it, right? It's like, it becomes like a thing. So, and it was very interesting for me to see this, that, for example, my generation, when I was growing, we didn't have this internet, social media, everything. So those very famous Nohas would reach us very slow in those cassettes and something of like Nadeem Sarwar, we would listen, and we wouldn't have like those like thing. But today it's a matter of like a few days. So probably that's an opportunity for us to maintain that emotional part, because that is very important when it comes to Imam Hussein, making arrangements so our next generation can connect. Again, I'm not saying this is the only way. Again, as I said, these are cultural expressions. I can't say you have to do it this way. It's a matter of, okay, in our setting, what's the best thing to do? For some of us who are, let's say, older, we have our ways of connecting. So we are sorted. Like, for example, I give my own personal example. I connect emotionally to Imam Hussein alayhi salam and the Shuhada in Urdu and later in Persian. And it's just like amazing, right? Like through the Urdu things and everything, and then the Persian Noha, everything. So I feel that, okay, I'm sorted. But when I look at my own children, I'm thinking, how would they connect? So it's a question for me. So sometimes I feel that, okay, let me take a very powerful culture that has a strong tradition of Azadari, and let me somehow, at least for this part, get my children to somehow connect with it. Does that mean that we cannot at all do it in English? Yes, as I mentioned, all cultures have the potential, but it requires work. You need poets, you need artists, you need so much to create that like a very, very good, strong, expressive culture for Azadari, Nohas, Matam, other expressions. If you can do it, go for it, it's fine. Again, I'm not saying it in a bad way. I'm saying that genuinely, I'm saying if it's possible, and there might be people, let's say there's some people who've grown up in the West, they understand no other language, but they've found ways that through English they can connect emotionally to Imam Hussein in a very significant way. If that's possible, yes. And of course, the other things similarly. We need to make arrangements so they can shed tears, like they connect, and that's the emotional, and upholding symbols. So symbols are diverse. At times you might use the same symbols we have. So at times you might want to introduce English symbols. That's fine. Like you have a T-shirt with English written on it. That's fine. It doesn't have to be like, let's say, only Arabic. So it's different for these different categories. Apologies, the answer became long. Yes?
Sheikh, what are the lines in terms of how we sanctify symbols? So there's a line between showing respect, upholding, but where is that line between sanctifying these symbols, and to what extent is it appropriate, and when does it become inappropriate?
Yeah. So this is a very important, interesting question. The first thing is that we'll have to define what do we mean by sanctifying, right? Because it's a word that we need to carefully define. If by sanctifying you mean respecting and showing a lot of respect, then it's same as respect, and that we generally know that if we have something that in a meaningful way is attributed to Imam Hussein and Azadari, then one of the duties we have is ta'azim, like we show that respect, so that's there. Even if, let me add this, even if let us say I don't connect emotionally to this specific symbol, because it's a symbol, I show respect. So if sanctifying means upholding and that thing, then it's the same as respect. But if by sanctifying, if you mean that it has certain intrinsic, spiritual value that is created in it, I don't know, did I make it too complicated? Like the symbol itself becomes something that has intrinsic spiritual value. In that place, we need to be a bit more careful. So in those places, those things attributed to the Ahlul Bayt originally, like for example, the things they left behind, the sword of the Holy Prophet, the dress, for example, or the places where they're actually buried. Again, all of this is tied to evidence we have. We have enough evidence, and maybe I can ask Sheikh Habib to, we are discussing this, and There's like, we have a lot of evidence showing that these specific things, they have intrinsic spiritual value, those actual places where the imams are buried. Okay? Or if something related to them was left behind, like the sword or a dress, we have enough evidence, it's tied to evidence that it has intrinsic spiritual value. But what about those things that were attributed later on? Okay. So those things, if you're looking at it, you're sanctifying it in order to sanctify the person, and that waliullah which is attributed to that, then still it's like you're trying to benefit spiritually from that person. So for example, you go to Alam, but in your mind it is that you're actually remembering Hazrat Abbas, and he has a lot of very high spiritual station, and you're kind of connecting to that. That again is good, because we know that these awliya, these people who are close to Allah, they have this thing that they're our guides. They can receive guidance and spiritual benefit from them. That's fine. Okay. Beyond that, it's something we will have to see that I would say I do not know. It needs more research, and we'll have to see that this specific thing has itself intrinsic value or not. I do not know. So it's something that would require more research. So it's always good. Like parts I don't know, I just say I don't know. It's much safer for me. Yes.
There was a time when Matam was being done, that in Lebanon and all that bleeding. It was shown to Germany for how many days, and they started putting a black spot on us that we are terrorists and we are murderers. So is that a symbol? Matam is a symbol, or should it be logical? Or if it gives a negative impact, what do we do? How do we answer?
Okay. So in these kind of cases, for example, this is one example, the bloodletting and the Zanjir Matam. You can use it for any other. And this is something which all the scholars say, that not only expression of Azadari, even any other action we do, if it leads to, again, I'm being very careful in my words, if it leads to insult of Islam, tawheen, or in Arabic they call wahn, then all the Maraji say that you can't do it. Again, I'm giving you very layman examples. I mean, these are not very good examples, but let us say, for example, I don't want to give examples that would be like not very appropriate. Let us say there's a scholar, and a scholar has a certain respect and everything, he's representing Islam. Let us say he goes on a street wearing something that kind of is counted as insult to Islam. He's like putting Islam down. That's not allowed, right? Like a scholar cannot dress outside in a way that would clearly be seen as an insult to Islam. This kind of a thing. That's not allowed. The same thing holds true for all the practices of Azadari, that if it counts as an insult to Islam, like when anybody looks at it, say that, oh, Islam is a lowly religion, Islam is so that kind of thing, so those we can't. But beyond that, let us say it's not counted as an insult to Islam. Again, I take back to the same criteria. We have to weigh on our values. What values is this practice representing? If it's representing positive values, it has positive impact, we keep it. If it has some negative elements, we filter those, we change those, and we constantly improve. So again, it will have to be seen for different practices. Some practices might need improvement because they might have a bit of a thing that can be changed, made better. Some practices are good, so we continue with them. So that's kind of the general way we approach it. Depends on that specific practice, what it is.
So you mean to say culture should be for us only, or it should impress the others outside?
Okay. So that's a very interesting question. So basically, this is a question that comes up that, okay, the essential parts of Azadari that we do, the main part is mainly for us, right? So it's basically like an internal Shia kind of in the Shia Islam, the madhab of Ahlul Bayt, and a lot of benefits, they go back to us. So as long as we are with those parts where the benefit goes back to us, and we're not trying to spread the message to others, we are okay with this, because these are the practices we understand, there's no misunderstanding. But what about when it comes to time when now we want to show the message to other communities? Okay. So there, two things need to happen. One is that it needs to be done in a way that is generally understandable. It's done in a way that they can receive the message. Okay. What I mean is this, that if you go and explain to them meaning of this action, they would understand. Initially, they may not. Let's say we do matam, when we go and do julus. Initially, the people outside may not understand what is this. But if I go and explain that, look, this is an expression of grief and we are standing for Imam Hussein and this, they will understand. So any expression that is explainable, which we can explain to other people, it's fine. But we should make sure that when we go out to others, we explain it to them. Otherwise, they'll be saying that what is happening. But there will be times that you might have an expression of Azadari, which is fine. You have even explained it to them. There still will be some people in that other sect, other religion, that still would say, oh, what these people are doing. Now, that is not my responsibility. It's similar to like this. I'll give you an example in another setting. For example, we pray on turba, right? We as Shias, we pray on turba, right? Okay. Is that a bad thing to do? No, right? It's part of Sharia and there's a reason why we have been told to do. Okay. Some of the Ahlus Sunnah or those who are like Salafis, they'll say that, oh, this is idol worship. Like they would say that, oh, you're prostrating on a stone, this is idol worship. So what do we do? As a first step, I'll go and I'll explain it to him. Why? Because it's something explainable. You say that, look, this is nothing to do with me worshipping the stone. It's another thing, part of our Sharia, because we have ahadith from the Ahlul Bayt that without this, it's batil, and it doesn't have to be a stone, it can be a piece of wood. So we have a valid explanation for prostrating on turba, which can be explained to them. So if you have a valid explanation, we continue with that practice. And we explain it to them also, so there's no misunderstanding. But even if you do that, there still will be some people amongst them, they'll say that, oh, these are still doing shirk. So just because there still will be people who will never accept, then doesn't mean that now I have to change my practice. Yes, I have to explain it to them. And at times I feel we don't do that. So again, this is my personal opinion that when it comes to projecting Azadari and message of Imam Hussein outside, I don't want to judge you people, but I think generally you're very weak. Like we, at times while doing Azadari for ourselves and benefiting and getting that spiritual benefit, community benefit, we are good. But when it comes to projecting our message, I feel that we can do a lot more. We should do a lot more because Imam Hussein is a powerhouse. If people connect to Imam Hussein, it's a big thing. Yeah, but this is where it comes that, again, don't want to say it again, but it should be something explainable. We explain it to them, and if beyond that they still are not happy, then there's not much I can do about that. If someone insists on saying that prostrating on turba is shirk, even though there's explanation, evidence, then we leave it at that. I think my time, I don't know what's the end time. Okay, maybe we'll just take one last question because the hand was raised, so I don't want to. Yes, Bismillah. Alaikum assalam.
As I'm remembering myself regarding the Azadari and briefing, we have direct, very pure in our Ziyarat Nahiya Muqaddasa is saying when Imam Hussein alayhi salam became Shaheed, all the family, they grieved a lot. They were even doing matam themselves out of the Khayyam. And then they were grieving and then they were slapping themselves. So whatever we are understanding from all the speeches, from the time when we understand in majalis, in speeches, so there are some roots. I'm not going to bring reason to, to bring one for Islam, unfortunately. I'm not going to bring any reason, but the grieving was there, and then we have enough in Maqatil, in Ahadith, that the grief was there. Even the Ahlul Bayt, the families, they grieved. Even Imam Riza alayhi salam was crying a lot while his eyes was becoming very redness because of the grief of Maqtal of Imam Hussein after how many years of this shahadat. Sorry.
So definitely I fully agree, and as I mentioned in the initial part of presentation, that these are the core elements of Azadari. Gatherings, majalis, expression of grief, that's definitely part of thing through all these different forms. Reading the makatil, paying attention to what happened, nawha, those artistic expressions, so we express grief. And a very specific form of grief, which is very integral part of Azadari, is shedding tears. and crying for Imam Hussein and wailing for Imam Hussein. So the word that was used was al-jaza. So all of that is recommended definitely. The only point that I made later is that all of these, and this is my last words, is that all of these we have to keep in mind that all of this is there so that inshallah we can, through these means, we can get closer to Allah, we get guided. The hadith that's there, Innal Husayna Misbahul Huda wa Safinatun Najat, so that we get closer to Imam Hussein, we can benefit from his guidance, we board that ark of salvation, we have that relationship with Imam Hussein, and eventually all of this leads us to that purpose and goal for which Imam Hussein sacrificed his life. And of course the way to do is the grief, is this expression of tears and shedding tears and azadari. So the goal is also important and how we do it is also important. Both of this inshallah we try and combine.
Last question.
Yes.
Should culture be logical? You mean to say today there is a procession going on. So you mean to say I'm going to explain each and everybody, or should it straight away hit their mind that no, this is what they are doing? Or I go and explain everybody. You know what is this? You know why this is? Is it? Should it be logical, or we need to explain?
There's three things. One is that step number one, it should be halal. Step number two, it should be packed with values. It should show a lot of values. Step number two. Step number three, it should be generally explainable. But that doesn't mean that if I don't explain it to every single person, I can't do that. It should be something that's commonly explainable. So this is what the scholar tells us. It should be halal. It should be value oriented. We should have a lot of values in our expressions. And third is that it should be generally explainable. It should be something that we can say that, look, this is the reason. I can't say that, okay, there's an expression that if I don't explain, they won't understand, so I should leave it. Probably because then it's like this, right? You can apply it to so many other practices. Like as a Muslim, even praying salat, if you go in a Western country, they don't understand. Should I stop praying? No. Why? Because it's a generally explainable thing. It's something, in other words, I would say it's logical. The third thing, generally explainable means logical. It's logical, it's sensible. I'm praying to my God in this format. There's nothing wrong about it. Maybe right now he doesn't understand. No, that adds to my duty. I should go and explain it to him. But that doesn't mean that because right now they don't understand, so I stop doing it. Of course, there's an exception to this, and that is the places of taqiyya, where your practice is going to put your life in danger. That's a very, very different kind of a thing. That has exceptions. So that has exception for everything. If you're going to go in a country and like pray, and they're going to come and kill you, of course, then it's a different situation. But that's a different story. So inshallah, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we get the tawfiq to inshallah understand these practices that we have, the reason behind why we do it, and inshallah as we understand them more, we also get the opportunity to benefit more from them. I'll just use 2 minutes because it's a Thursday night, and Thursday nights it's the month of Muharram. I'll just use 2 minutes to recite a few words of Musibah. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdillah. Because we are nearing the martyrdom and the date of Shahadat of Imam Zainul Abidin, let us take this opportunity to remember our fourth Imam, Imam Zainul Abidin, who was present through all these difficulties, all these masa'ib that came in Karbala. And what made it even difficult for Imam Zainul Abidin was that not only he witnessed all those masa'ib in Karbala, seeing his brothers being martyred, his father in that state, but he also had to continue the journey and see those very, very difficult masa'ib that happened in Kufa and Sham. And that probably really, really saddened his heart, because whenever he would be asked that, which was the hardest part, which really broke your heart, Imam would always say, Asham, Asham, Asham. And what even made it difficult for Imam Zainul Abidin was that even after the events of Karbala finished, for 40 years, because he had seen those scenes with his own eyes, for 40 years, for his entire lifetime, to his own martyrdom, he would remember about Abdullah Hussain. That we have these narrations that whenever he would see a butcher slaughtering an animal, he would remember about Abdullah Hussain. And he would ask that person that, have you given this animal water? So that person would reply, of course I'm a Muslim, of course I'm a Muslim. No Muslim slaughters an animal thirsty. And then his eyes would be filled with tears and would say that, but my father, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, qutila atshana. He was martyred thirsty. He was martyred, he was slaughtered in a way an animal is slaughtered. I just want to mention one incident that was very, very difficult for Imam Zainul Abidin. That on the 11th of Muharram, when these ladies and children, Imam Zainul Abidin, who were left behind, they were mounted on camels. And these oppressors, these enemies of Allah, they took these camels from the battlefield. They could have taken another route, they could have taken them from another place, but they wanted to add to their difficulty, so they passed these camels from the battlefield, and all the bibis and the ladies and the women and Imam Zainul Abidin, they are saying that their beloved ones, they do not have any kafan, their heads are separated from their bodies, and they are passing. So it was at that moment when Imam Zainul Abidin looks at the bodies of his brothers, the other companions of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. He looks at the body of his father, Imam Hussein, which was trampled. The Maqtal says that a situation came where it was as if Imam Zainul Abidin's soul would separate from his body. He was not able to bear it. And it was at this moment that Bibi Zainab Salamullah alayha, she calls out to Imam Zainul Abidin and says, Mali araka tajudu bi nafsik. Why do I see you in this state? You are our Imam. I see that the grief has overtaken you. Your soul will separate from your body. Why do I see you in this state? So Imam Zainul Abidin turns back and answers that, why should I not be in this state? I can see my brothers and their bodies scattered in the battlefield of Karbala. I can see the body of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein trampled, and the head is separated from the body. سَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ.
متوجز يا رب.
السلام عليك يا مولاي يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا مولاتي يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث علي أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين.
فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمت، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها، ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين، وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي، وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرائع الدين وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم، وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه، السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وأوداءه، السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الناصح، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله، بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأحوطهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمت، ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر، والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه، الراغب فيما زيد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل، وألحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا علي بن الحسين زين العابدين. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا محمد الباقر. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا جعفر الصادق. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا موسى الكاظم. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا علي الرضا. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا محمد الجواد. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا علي الهادي. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا حسن العسكري. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وأينا حتى تسكنه وذكاته وتمتعه فيها طويلا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.